Ages past, when the world was cloaked in mist, and men still feared the night, there was a forgotten hamlet in the hollow of Middle England. The reign of King James I had cast a long, uneasy shadow across the land. In this desolate village, where the winds spoke in sighs and the trees groaned under invisible burdens, there lived an old woman and her 3 sons. Their cottage, crooked and crumbling, stood at the edge of the woods, where the brambles grew thick and the crows never ceased their morning cries. The eldest son, strong and full of fire, had been wrenched from his home and sent across the sea to Ireland to bleed for a king who would soon bleed himself dry. Few dared speak it aloud, but doom was already etched into the bones of the kingdom. King James would lose his battles, lose his crown, lose his very country to the slow, merciless turning of fate's wheel. In his place would rise William of Orange, a Protestant king crowned not with gold, but with the bitterness and blood of those cast aside. King James, proud in his Catholic faith, had sown hatred like seed across the fields of England. Under his iron reign, Protestants had suffered, silenced beneath the heavy heel of the crown. But hatred festers best in silence, and when it bursts forth, it devours without mercy. Thus was born the great madness, the witch hunt. Fear became the language of the land. In every village candles burned through the nights, not in prayer, but in terror. Eyes darted to every flicker of shadow, tongues wagged behind closed doors. Neighbor turned against neighbor, sister against sister. No soul, no matter how pure, was safe from the venom of whispered accusation. Old women were the first to fall. A black cat curled at a hearthstone, a jar of herbs on a windowsill, a muttered word to the wind. All were proof enough of devilry, a grudge, a debt unpaid, a love spurned. These became weapons, sharper than any blade, and when the cry went out, there was no salvation, only fire, only smoke, only the terrible sentence, spoken aloud, burned at the stake. The kingdom devoured its own under the guise of righteousness. The air itself seemed heavy with ashes, and the earth drank deeply of innocent blood. In that crooked hamlet, tucked beneath the sorrowful boughs, the old woman and her sons could only wait and wonder which night the knock would come for them. Because in those dark, forsaken days, guilt and innocence meant nothing at all. Only the flames would have the final word. The elders' wounded pride found the perfect weapon in the oncoming fear. It was a chance for revenge too sweet to resist, a chance to not only punish the old woman who had scorned him, but to shield his own house from suspicion. If the villagers were busy pointing their trembling fingers at her, they would have no reason to look toward his daughters. The rumor was out, and it thickened with each passing day, like smoke choking the breath from the village. Before the hunter's arrival, the day of reckoning as it came to be known, the hamlet became a place of strife. Old friends quarreled, families divided. Some fought to defend the old woman, speaking of her kindness, her wisdom. Others, desperate for their own survival, turned against her, whispering that she had always been different, strange, too proud by half. May Cooper, poor May, was left to endure the growing storm alone. She had been a widow for 14 long and lonely years, working her patch of land with only her sons for help. Her eldest, William, was away fighting in distant Ireland, and she feared with a mother's heart that she might never see him again. Each night she knelt before the hearth, hands clasped, praying that William would return in time to save her from the fate closing fast around her. Her youngest, Matthew, was just 16, a boy caught between childhood and the hard demands of a cruel world. He had no memory of his father, taken by illness when Matthew was still in the cradle. Yet despite the hardship, Matthew remained bright and merry, a streak of mischief lighting his days. Tall, with fair hair and a rosy, cheeky smile, he teased all who crossed his path, especially his brothers, whom he missed more than he could ever say. Then there was Aidan, quieter, slower, content to drift through life with a calm few could shake. Yet Aidan's eyes, sharp and knowing, missed nothing. Where Matthew would laugh even as the storm clouds gathered, Aidan would stand silently, watching, measuring the shifting winds. And so the scene was set. The last grain of hope slid through May Cooper's fingers as the day of the hunter's arrival dawned, heavy and grey. A day that would be marked in the village's memory as a day of mourning, a day when hearts broke and innocence burned. But what none could yet know was this: the events unleashed that day would not end with the setting of the sun. They would send shockwaves rippling through time itself, echoing across centuries, claiming countless lives yet unborn, and binding many fates in sorrow and blood. The witch hunt had come to their door, and death would not leave quietly. The old man had once looked upon the old woman as a necessary ally. Their farms were neighbours, their fortunes entwined by the harsh demands of the land. When hardship gnawed at the village and the future grew uncertain, he came to her with a proposition, a marriage between their bloodlines, his daughter to her eldest son. It was not a thing of love, but of survival, a binding of families, a merging of labour and land, meant to stave off the creeping hunger of poverty. But May Cooper, proud and fierce even in widowhood, would not have it. She saw in the old man's offer something rotted at the root, an act of desperation, not unity. She would not tie her son's fate to the withering ambitions of another. She refused him firmly and publicly before those whose whispers would later carry the weight of judgment. The elder, once content to see himself as a man of standing, felt the blow as a mortal wound to his pride. To be rejected by a woman, one who should have been beneath him, was an insult he could neither forgive nor forget. In his wounded pride, resentment fermented into hatred, and when talk of the witch-hunter began to slither through the village, it offered the old man a cruel, perfect chance for revenge. By turning the village's growing fear against May Cooper, he could see her brought low without ever soiling his own hands. He would cast her as a witch, a corrupt soul in league with dark powers, an enemy not just of himself, but of the entire village. In doing so, he could protect his daughters from suspicion, wipe clean the stain of his humiliation, and satisfy the gnawing bitterness in his heart. Thus, pride, spurned affection, and the dark hunger for revenge conspired together. The old man became the architect of the old woman's doom, cloaking his treachery in the guise of righteousness, and the village, fearful and eager for a scapegoat, was only too willing to believe. The old man sat alone by the dying hearth, the last embers painting his face in sickly orange light. The cold crept in through the cracked stones of his cottage, but he did not shiver. He barely moved at all, save for the slow, rhythmic tapping of his gnarled fingers against the wood of his chair. Outside, the wind howled like a thing in mourning. Inside, only silence answered. He thought of her, May Cooper, with her head held high, her eyes sharp as winter frost. He thought of the day she had refused him, the way her voice had cut the air with no hesitation, no fear. She had made him small, she had made him weak, and in a village like this, weakness was a death sentence all its own. The hunter was coming. The rumor had already taken root, fed by fear and desperation. Someone would have to burn, someone always did. And there, in the flickering half-light, a thought slithered into his mind, dark and irresistible. Could be her. He need not even say her name. A whisper here, a suggestion there, a word about her strange ways, her stubborn pride, her missing husband who had died so young, leaving her untouched by grief. Had anyone ever seen her at prayer? Had anyone ever questioned how her fields prospered when others failed? He could feel it already, the villagers' suspicion gathering like a storm at sea. He leaned forward in his chair, the fire's glow carving deep lines into his weathered face. The decision came easily, like a knife sliding between ribs. If the village demanded a witch, he would give them one. And he would watch as her pride, her life, was reduced to smoke and ash. No one would dare refuse him again. Not after this. The old man leaned back, the faintest ghost of a smile curling at the corners of his mouth. Outside, the wind rose to a wail, and the last ember in the hearth sputtered and died. The morning of the hunter's arrival was no morning at all. The sky hung low, swollen and grey, bleeding a thin mist over the land. The village huddled in its hollow, silent as the grave, every door barred, every hearth cold. Even the crows, ever the village's mournful companions, had taken flight, leaving only the sound of the wind whispering through the empty lanes. It began with the ringing of hooves, dull at first, like distant thunder, growing louder, heavier, until the very earth seemed to tremble beneath them. Then through the mist they came. 5 riders cloaked in black from head to heel, faces hidden beneath broad-brimmed hats and shadowed cowls. Iron glinted at their belts, chains, shackles, cruel tools whose purpose needed no explaining. At their head rode the witch hunter himself. He was a figure out of some fevered dream, gaunt and tall, swathed in a coat of thick, dark leather, stained by 1,000 nameless things. Across his chest hung a chain from which dangled talismans, bones, feathers, bits of cloth soaked in blood. His horse, a monstrous thing blacker than pitch, snorted clouds of steam into the chill morning air. But it was his face that froze the breath in the villagers' lungs. For what little could be seen beneath his hat was pale and hard, a mask of judgment carved in marble. His eyes, cold as dead winter, saw everything, and forgave nothing. No call was made, no announcement was needed. The villagers knew why he had come. Doors creaked open as frightened faces peered out, mothers clutching their children, old men crossing themselves with shaking hands. The witch hunter dismounted without a word, his boots crunching against the frozen earth. He stood in the center of the village square, silent until the last echo of hooves had faded into the mist. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud, yet it carried clear as a tolling bell across the trembling village. "Bring me the names." One by one they came forth, offering whispers, glances, trembling fingers pointed toward those they dared not name aloud. The village elder was among the first, stooped and grim-faced, speaking in low tones of May Cooper's strange ways, her pride, her refusal to join in prayer, her cursed good fortune when others suffered. And so the trap was sprung. May Cooper, still unaware, still waiting for her son's return, still hoping for a mercy that would never come, went about her day as the jaws of betrayal closed silently around her. The hunter had his quarry, the villagers had their scapegoat, and death. Death had already taken his seat among them. The knock came at dusk, hard and heavy against the door, rattling the frame. Not a polite rap, not the call of a neighbor. It was the summons of death itself. May Cooper set down her spinning and rose, heart hammering against her ribs. The fire in the hearth sputtered and hissed, as if warning her to run, but she knew there was no place left to flee. Matthew, sensing something wrong, was already on his feet, his fair hair wild, his cheeks flushed red with fear. Aidan stood near the window, stiff and silent, eyes darting toward the dark shapes gathering outside. Another knock, louder this time. The latch rattled violently. Voices called out, hollow and commanding. "May Cooper, by order of the Crown and the Church, you are summoned to answer for the crime of witchcraft." Matthew rushed to the door, fists balled, but Aidan caught his arm. He shook his head once, sharply. "Don't," Aidan whispered. "They'll hang you too." But Matthew, reckless, angry Matthew, wrenched free, shouting through the door, "She's no witch! She's no witch, you cowards!" For a moment there was only silence outside. Then the door was kicked in, crashing open with a roar of splintered wood. The witch hunter's men flooded into the cottage. Iron and leather and cruelty made flesh. They seized May roughly, dragging her into the cold night without ceremony. Her sons fought, Matthew like a wild thing, clawing and shouting, Aidan grim and desperate, trying to pull his mother free. They were beaten back with the flats of swords. Matthew caught a blow to the head and crumpled to the ground, blood trailing from his brow. Aidan fell to his knees beside him, choking on rage and helplessness. May Cooper did not scream, she did not plead, even as the irons bit into her wrists, even as the villagers, those she had fed, those she had wept beside, looked on in silence or turned their faces away. She raised her chin high against the bitter wind and met the witch hunter's gaze without flinching. In that moment, she seemed taller than the men who bound her. A queen walking to the scaffold. The torches lit the path through the village, their flames casting monstrous, twisting shadows along the broken ground. Behind them, the broken door swung on its hinges, the home torn open like a wound that would never truly heal. The brothers, bruised and bleeding, watched her vanish into the night. And somewhere, deep beneath the earth, something ancient stirred at the injustice, something that would not sleep quietly. Ruins of their broken home, the hearth cold, the air thick with despair. Matthew's head was bandaged where the soldier's sword had struck him. Aidan's lip was split, and his knuckles bruised raw. But it was not the pain of their wounds that hollowed them out. It was the hollow absence where their mother had been. They knew the village would not save her. They knew no amount of pleading or truth would sway the witch hunter. He had not come for justice. He had come for blood. Matthew's voice, low and shaking with rage, broke the silence. "She won't survive their questions. You've seen what they do." Aidan stared into the dead hearth, his face a mask of stone. "Then we give them what they want," he said quietly. Matthew turned to him, confused. "We tell them it's us," Aidan whispered, voice trembling, not with fear but resolve. "We say we're the witches. We take her place." For a long moment, Matthew said nothing. Then he gave a crooked, broken smile, the kind he used to give when they were boys, plotting some childish rebellion. "Aye," he said hoarsely. "Better us than her." They rose together, two battered, bloodied boys, stepping into the jaws of the wolf. The trial was no trial at all. It was a spectacle, a feast of fear and cruelty, presided over by the cold eye of the witch hunter. May Cooper stood in the center of the square, her wrists bound, her body shivering under the jeers of the crowd that once had been her neighbors. Then, before the accusations could be laid at her feet, two figures stumbled forward, Aidan and Matthew, bruised and bloodied, but unbowed. They fell to their knees before the hunter. "It's us," Matthew cried. "Not her. We practice witchcraft. We call to the old gods of the wood and field. He faltered only once, glancing at his mother's pale, stricken face. Aidan picked up where he left off, his voice cold, dead, resigned. "Take us. Let her go." For a moment, just a moment, the witch hunter's expression flickered, not with pity but with curiosity. Here was a novelty, the accused offering themselves up without a fight. The crowd murmured, uneasy. This was not how it was supposed to go. The hunter stepped forward, boots crunching on frozen dirt. He studied the brothers with a gaze that peeled flesh from bone. Finally, he spoke. The devil is a liar. He speaks through many mouths. 2 more to silence, then. He turned to the villagers. Take them all. Gasps broke from the crowd, but no one moved to stop it. And so the irons closed on all 3, the mother and her sons. Their fate was sealed, their sacrifice unheeded. As they were dragged toward the hill where the fires would be lit, May turned to her sons, her voice fierce, even through the sobs. You should have let me go. But they only smiled. Matthew, even now with his broken, bloody mouth, and Aidan with a look of sorrowful peace. We're together, Matthew whispered. That's enough. The flames that rose that night could be seen for miles. The village would never speak of it again, but the stain could never be washed away. And somewhere, deep in the black soil, the earth drank in their pain, their fury, their love. It would not forget, nor would it forgive, not for centuries. The villagers gasped when the witch hunter gave the order, but none dared speak against him. May Cooper was dragged roughly from the stake, the bonds cut from her wrists, her body crumpling into the mud. She tried to rise, tried to throw herself back to her sons, but the soldiers held her fast. Mercy, they said, as if it were a kindness. Matthew and Aidan remained bound, tied fast to the stakes, the rough ropes biting into their bruised skin. The witch hunter stood between them, the firelight dancing across his cruel face. The blood of witches will cleanse this place, he said. Their lies, their dark gifts, end tonight. He thrust the torch into the pyre at Matthew's feet first. The flames licked upward, catching dry kindling, climbing like serpents. Matthew twisted, gritting his teeth against the unbearable heat, but he did not scream. He turned his head, what was left of his boyish, bloodied smile, and looked at his mother struggling against the guards. "It's all right, Mum," he gasped through the smoke. "It's all right." The fire roared higher, drowning his voice, swallowing his body in a writhing crown of flame. Aidan, slower, steadier, did not fight the flames as they caught his clothes, his hair. He raised his head to the blackened sky and let out a low, wordless sound, a sound that was not pain, but something deeper. A vow. The ground beneath the pyres trembled, the smoke blackened, coiling up into shapes that no man dared describe. The villagers fell back, crossing themselves, muttering prayers under their breath. They dared not look into the fire, for in it they saw not just the death of 2 boys, but the death of themselves, the slow rot of guilt that would eat their bones in the long years to come. And through it all, May screamed. She screamed her sons' names until her voice was ragged, until she tasted blood. The witch hunter turned his back and rode from the village, satisfied. The villagers followed in silence, leaving the blackened hill behind them, leaving the woman alone in the ash, in the ruin, with the charred remains of everything she loved. The mist swallowed the hill, and it was said that from that day on nothing would grow there, not a blade of grass, not a tree, not even the hardiest weed. The ground was cursed, the village too. And May Cooper lived out her days a hollow woman, haunted by the sound of fire crackling and the smell of smoke on the wind. At night, when the mist rolled thick through the village, those who dared listen swore they could hear it still. The sound of 2 young men laughing, and the crackle of flames that would never die. The days that followed were hollow and strange. The villagers pretended life went on. The fields were ploughed, the bells tolled, the markets bustled, but a shadow clung to the village, thick and heavy, poisoning every breath. No one dared return to the hill where the fire had raged. No one except May Cooper. She went alone at twilight, her body wrapped in black, her hands bare against the cutting cold. The charred stakes still stood, blackened sentinels against the bruised sky. The ash lay thick on the earth, twisted with the fragments of her son's final agony, pieces of bone, scraps of cloth, the final remnants of laughter and life. She knelt in the cinders, heedless of the soot that blackened her hands and face. With a wooden bowl and bare, bloodied fingers, she gathered what little was left of her boys, cradling their ashes like a mother might cradle a newborn. Not a sound escaped her lips, not a tear stained her cheek. Her grief had hollowed her out into something deeper, something harder. At the center of the hill, beneath the weeping sky, she dug a hole with her bare hands. Clawing through the blackened earth, breaking her nails, tearing her skin, she dug until the soil turned slick with blood and ash. From the folds of her cloak she drew a single, slender sapling, an oak, hardy and proud, its leaves already beginning to unfurl. She placed her son's ashes into the earth, murmuring words so old that even the earth seemed to listen. Then she placed the sapling atop the ashes and packed the earth around it, her hands trembling with exhaustion and rage. When she was done, she pressed her forehead to the soil. "Grow strong," she whispered. "Grow tall. Hold them close, and never forgive." The first raindrops fell then, hissing against the cooling ash. The sky wept, for what the village could not. The oak tree years passed. The oak grew. It grew faster than any tree ought. Its roots cracked the hilltop open, its branches clawed at the sky, and its leaves were dark, almost black, and never fell, even in the deepest winters. The villagers came to fear it. They crossed themselves when they passed by. Children were warned never to go near it. They said at night you could hear the tree whispering, creaking and groaning in the wind, the voices of two boys calling out across the centuries. Some said that if you listened too long, you would be pulled into the earth, swallowed whole. None dared touch it. None dared cut it down. It was May's monument. It was her vengeance. It was her heartbreak. May Cooper lived on, but she was little more than a ghost among the ruins of her life. She spoke only when she must, her voice dry and brittle as fallen leaves. She tended the great oak that grew over her son's ashes, visiting the hill every morning, her black shawl trailing in the dirt like a mourning veil that never lifted. She waited too. Waited for her eldest son, William, who had marched off to war long ago with promises of glory and return. Every season she watched the horizon. Every year she told herself that perhaps this time she would see him riding home. But William never came back. Whether he died on some muddy battlefield, whether he was buried in foreign soil, or whether he wandered lost and broken, no one could say. Only that he never came. And so the last light of May, Cooper's hope guttered out, leaving only ashes. The village around her withered, farms failed, children sickened, families fled. It was said the oak was to blame, a thing planted in cursed ground, watered with innocent blood. But no one dared cut it down, no one dared cross May Cooper. In the end, she was alone, the last soul in a dying place. And one bitter winter's night, when the cold crept down from the hills like a living thing, she made her way to the oak for the final time. The tree loomed massive against the blood-red moon, its black leaves hissing with unseen voices. May knelt at its roots, her bones creaking like old branches, and rested her forehead against the frozen soil. She whispered her sons' names, Matthew, Aidan, and William, names that cracked from her tongue like dry twigs snapping. Then she closed her eyes and gave herself to the earth. The villagers, what few remained, heard it from their shuttered homes. A deep, groaning sound, as if the hill itself was splitting apart. The oak shook, its limbs clawing at the sky, and a dark mist rose, swirling into the shape of three figures, a mother and her sons, vanishing into the black heavens. When dawn came, they found her body at the base of the tree. Her face was peaceful at last, half buried in the roots that had twisted lovingly around her, pulling her down into the soil she had fed with her sorrow. The oak thrived, the village died, the road turned to dust and the fields to wasteland. And the hill, that black, barren hill crowned by a tree whose leaves never fell, became a place of legend. Some nights, when the mist rolls thick and cold, the bold or the foolish say you can hear them, the laughter of boys, the weeping of a mother. The dead do not rest easily on that hill. The dead remember, and the dead wait.